Hey there, happy Monday everybody. Now, as I mentioned in the last video, I am off of ice cream for the rest of the year because this is when cookie and candy making season starts. But the very first thing I always start with is toffee. We're gonna use a pound of butter, that's right, a pound of butter, 4 full sticks. And to that we add 2.5 cups of sugar, 1/3 cup of water, a teaspoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of corn syrup. And now we will just bring that up over medium heat. We want to bring that to a boil. Now I'm just stirring occasionally here as the butter melts. We want to make sure that we get all of that sugar nicely dissolved before it comes to a boil, just so that nothing scorches on the bottom of the pan. Okay, it looks like all of our butter is melted, all of the sugar is nicely dissolved. So now I take out the spatula. So now with a bowl of water and our trusty pastry brush, we brush the sides to wash down any of the sugar and butter that may have gotten along the sides. This sort of prevents any odd crystallization from happening that might ruin the final texture of the candy. I'm just going to rotate the pan here so I can see the other side. And we wash down the sides. And we'll just keep that, close by in case we need it. We are up to a boil. So we insert our candy thermometer. And we're looking for 300 degrees, which is the beginnings of the hard crack stage of candy. That is when a candy has a nice snap to it. It solidifies firmly and has a nice snap. So the candy thermometer is already rising. We're already up to our 212 for boiling. This part takes a little bit of time as we cook out all of the water, both that we added and then from the butter as well. Avoid any urges to stir at this point. If you feel the need to mix, all you have to do is just swirl the pan a little bit. And we'll probably come back and wash down the sides a couple more times as we go along. Again, as I said, just to prevent any odd crystallization from happening. It's been a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and wash down the sides of the pan again. If you're curious of how I got into making candies this time of year, I'd always been a cookie person. I've always liked to make a lot of sort of goodies to give away to friends and family. And a couple of years ago, I just, on a whim, decided to make some caramels after seeing the video on Claire Saffitz's channel, Dessert Person. And I gave those a try. I found I really enjoyed it. Just sort of the unpredictability of sugar and sort of the meticulous nature that you have to take when making candy. And so then I tried making marshmallows, and toffee was the next thing that I made, and it was all turning out well, and I really enjoyed it. So I just sort of kept expanding my candy repertoire, and now I make maybe a half a dozen true like sugar candies. I make a few chocolate-based candies too, if you want to count those. But as far as bringing sugar up to the napalm stage, I make probably a half a dozen things like that. And I just got into it because it was a lot of fun. It's sort of like how I got into any of my hobbies. I do it because, well, A, it's fun, and then B, there's a product that you can use at the end. You know, I'm not knocking something like video gaming. I play games occasionally, but I wouldn't consider myself a gamer for sure. But you walk away from that, and what do you have to show for your time? Nothing, really. Whereas something like making candy, cookies, ice cream, those sort of things, I'll walk away with a product that I can eat or share, or in the case of model rockets, go out and have some fun launching. So we're about 2:30, coming up on the softball stage, and since we're climbing into that range, that means most of our water has boiled out. And you do have to be careful, because once we do hit the firm ball stage, about 250, this happens really quickly, and you can go from candy to burn sugar in no time, and that is not fun. We're around 240 degrees, which is called the softball stage, and I'll demonstrate. Hopefully I don't ruin this candy by doing this, but we'll take a little spoonful and drop it into some water. And so at this stage, when cooled, it holds its shape, but it's very soft. But I will go ahead and give it another swirl. And since we swirled, we'll go ahead and wash down the sides. All right, about 15 minutes in, we're right around 255, which is somewhere between the firm ball and hard ball stage, and we'll go ahead and demonstrate again what that means. So just drop some of that into some ice water. So at this point, the candy can be rolled into a ball, but when squeezed, has quite a bit of resistance. So like the name implies, it's relatively firm. It's not quite hard ball yet, but we're somewhere in between the two. Go ahead and wash down the sides again after we swirled. And I missed a little spot back here and right here. And ow, yep. There's the first burn of the season. And now about 3 or 4 minutes later, we are closing in on the soft crack stage. We're about 282. So we'll demonstrate again. Take some of that sugar, put it into our ice water. And at this point, it no longer really forms a ball, but, and there's you can't squeeze it for resistance, but it does break with sort of a ductile break. And as I mentioned, these last few degrees happen relatively quickly, so I'm going to get the countertop cleared off. And there we are, 300. Like I said, that took about another minute. And now onto a silicone-lined baking sheet. You can use parchment if you want. These days, pretty much the only thing I use Silpat for is candy. And let's just get that poured into a nice thin layer, or even layer, maybe not thin. Give it a nice jiggle to make sure everything's even. I can tell either my stovetop is not completely level or my baking sheet is not completely level, and either one is possible. I'm just gonna let that cool for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and score it so that we can make some nice even breaks. I am going to create some score lines in the toffee, and that's really just to give it a nice sort of a natural place for it to break. You're creating some little weak spots. If you're an engineer, we call them a stress riser. Cutting these down to a general shape that we like. Maybe call it 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you'll see some of those, especially here in the middle where it's still the warmest, maybe didn't keep those lines perfectly. So I may give it another minute or two and come back and score it again. I may not. We may have enough of a score for it to break. Even when you create these lines, it doesn't always break right there, which is fine. This needs to cool completely, which could take over an hour. Depends on how cool your kitchen is. I keep my house pretty cool. Well, it's 56 against the window, but it's probably 64 degrees in here right now. So, but this will take at least an hour to cool, maybe longer. But don't worry, because your patience will be rewarded. It's been about an hour and a half, and this is definitely cool to the touch. So you can break along those score lines. Like I said, it won't always break perfectly. Some of it has to do with just the way the sugar cools, and our cuts are not always perfect. But some of these break very nicely. And we'll go ahead and get these bagged up, and I'm going to put them in the freezer in preparation for the next step, which is to get some water up to a nice light boil, heavy simmer, because on top of that we have a glass bowl filled with some 65% chocolate discs. And we're basically making a double boiler here. Now you could melt this chocolate in the microwave if you really wanted to, but this is a better way because it makes sure that you don't scorch any of that chocolate. The water sort of helps to maintain the temperature because obviously water can't exceed 212 degrees at sea level. Now you could go through the process of tempering this chocolate, which involves bringing it up to a certain temperature and then cooling it down to another temperature. That sort of gives you a glossy appearance in the end and a nice snap to the chocolate. I found that at least for these toffees, it doesn't matter that much, so we're not going to worry about it because it is quite the chore. So we're just going to keep stirring this until this chocolate melts. Okay, that took about 5 minutes. The chocolate is all melted. It's nice and smooth and creamy. I'm going to move it to the back because now we have our baking sheet. It is now now covered with a cooling rack. So we'll just take one of these pieces and we drop it into the chocolate and use our forks to sort of toss it around a little bit. Make sure all the sides are coated, and then lift it with a fork. Give it a nice gentle shake to sort of shake off any of that or drop it back in. That's fine too. We'll do it again, and then using our same fork, lift it out of the chocolate, give it a nice gentle shake to sort of shake off any of that chocolate, and we move it to our cooling rack. And we'll just continue to repeat this. This is called enrobing. We're basically covering all the sides in chocolate. Now, industrial enrobing machines are pretty cool. They basically create a waterfall of whatever you're coating your food in. But we're not making industrial levels of toffee, so this is sufficient. Just for a little finishing touch, we have some white chocolate that I did melt in the microwave, and just using a fork, we'll just go ahead and grab some of that and sort of wing it across the top of these toffees. Give us a nice sort of zebra stripe pattern. I feel like it's maybe not quite melted enough because it's clumping up on me, or maybe my chocolate is just old. Also a possibility. There we go, that's starting to work a little bit better. And now these need to cool until that chocolate sets, which would probably be about a half an hour. These have had enough time to chill. Let's see what we have inside. Well, actually the chocolate on the bottom is still a little tacky, so I guess they need to chill a little bit more, but it's close enough for us to do a quick little taste test. So you see the toffee on the inside, you got your chocolate on the outside. It's basically like a Heath bar, but better because we made it ourselves. Okay, we're gonna get these off the cooling rack. Easiest way I've found is just to flip it over and kind of push on these from the back. You can try and lift them, but they tend to stick a little bit, and you may lose a little bit of chocolate on some of them. So we've got these all popped off of the cooling rack. I usually have little candy wrappers to put these in. For some reason I can't find those right now, so we use these little cellophane bags. Put a couple pieces in and go ahead and zip it up, and it's ready to go. I want to thank you for joining me on the first video of candy making, and hopefully there's a few more and some cookies as well. Anyway, I hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye!